Hi, I'm so glad you could join us for this episode of Believe in Magic Place live Q&A. I'm your host, Paul Burnham. Today, I'm joined by the professional opportunist himself, James Brown. Welcome to Believe in Magic Place Public. I'm your host, Paul Burnham. Today we have a live Q&A with James Brown, the professional opportunist. And James, I'm going to just start it right there and let you tell everybody what a professional opportunist is.
Hi, Paul, and everybody on the Believe forum. Thank you very much for having me to start off with. It was quite a delightful surprise when I had the message a week or two ago saying that people had asked for me to come on this and have a chat. It was quite delightful to know that there were people from around the globe who are interested in the nonsense that comes out of my head. So first and foremost, professional opportunist. There's a kind of a little backstory to this. First of all, and I don't mean to sound contentious right from the off here, but certainly here in the UK, magician is not necessarily the most revered trade in the world. Magic is a very cool thing. Magic will always be a wonderful thing that elicits all the best responses in people. Unfortunately, magician doesn't. In a lot of areas, magician can be quite a negative connotation, or have a negative connotation for a lot of people. I mean, I didn't come into magic until I was sort of late teens, early 20s, and prior to that, the idea of a magician in my head was, a clown of some description. It was either the chap who did sort of balloon animals down at the restaurant on a Sunday afternoon, or it was your Uncle Bob who did that terrible card trick every Christmas and bored the pants off people. So as I sort of, I worked as a magician, as in I advertised myself as a magician specifically for a long time, but I realized that it was detrimental in the sense that it confined me to a very narrow area of work. For example, I've got a great interest in psychology, in hypnosis and such like, and a company is not going to necessarily invest a lot of money for me to come and do some sort of corporate training if they perceive me as just a magician. So I was searching for an alternative to, something else to call myself, which gave me a bit more of a broader spectrum, potential broader spectrum to cover. And it was there were two people involved in creating the name. There was a very, very good friend of mine, and many of the listeners and the watchers will know of a man called Ian Rowland from the UK. He literally wrote the book on cold reading. And if you haven't got that book, I strongly suggest that you have a look for it. It's I think it's called The Full Facts of Cold Reading, if memory serves. It is an astonishingly good book. If you're interested in that genre, there is no better place to start or end, as far as I'm concerned. We'd been friends for many years, had lots of conversations, and he referred to my magic style as being opportunistic, in the sense that I didn't really have a script. I didn't know particularly where I was going to go. Some people might refer to it as sort of jazz magic, and I like that analogy. It's the idea in my head. Jazz magic is about knowing all the notes, but not necessarily knowing what order you're going to put them in. So I think there was something in that. Also within that is the idea of taking opportunities whenever they present themselves. And it was another friend of mine, Darius Zaitabari, who simply, just in conversation, stuck the word professional in front of it. And that was it, professional opportunist. And I thought, you know what, that's really good, because it's it's purposefully ambiguous. It doesn't in and of itself tell you who I am or what I do, and by simply strapping underneath it, magician, pickpocket, hypnotist, all of a sudden you've got this very broad spectrum of what I do, and it allows me to present myself as a performer, as a consultant, as an author, as a teacher trainer, and it really does give me a lot of scope. So there we go. There's the quick story of why professional opportunist. Actually, just very quickly, Paul. This is sort of vaguely interesting. I won't say who, because it would be unprofessional too. But I got an email from somebody relatively prominent within the magic world a number of years ago, saying that he thought Professional Opportunist was it was actually when I released the DVDs, the Professional Opportunist DVD set. He said, Professional Opportunist is a terrible name for you, or name for the DVD, because it has negative connotations. An opportunist is somebody who takes advantage of other people, etc. And it's interesting that what is it now? How long have I been using that term for? It's got to be 5+ years now. He is the only person who's suggested it being negative. On the other hand, almost everybody I meet on a professional level as a performer, lay people, think it's brilliant. They love the idea. They're tickled by it. And what is interesting to me, and maybe you want to come back to this later, it falls into this idea that generally speaking, the lay people out there do not distinguish particularly within our craft. In other words, we separate magic from mentalism, or mentalism from pickpocketing, or pickpocketing from whatever. And I think that the general public don't do that at all. If you're a magician, there's a good chance that somebody has said to you, "Oh, don't steal my watch." Whether you've ever hinted at pickpocketing before is irrelevant. They put it together. If you're doing a card trick to somebody, there's a good chance that they'll make some comment about, "Oh, don't read my mind," because they don't know the difference at all. And it's only us as magicians that have this bizarre need to identify and define ourselves in such a way, which, interestingly enough, answers the question that was on the thread earlier on today, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Whether there's a difference between, or whether you can segue from one to the other. My personal opinion, and all of the, I'm going to say this evening, it's my own personal opinion, you can take it or leave it ultimately, but my personal opinion is it doesn't matter. I regularly go from doing a blatant sleight of hand based, misdirection based piece of magic, say for instance Card Under Glass, personal favorite of mine, followed immediately with a very serious, if not ever so slightly tongue-in-cheek at times, piece of mind reading, even down to very, very serious mind reading, where I genuinely want my audience to perceive that I have some netherworld skills almost. So I don't, my experience is doesn't make any difference at all. As far as they're concerned, you're a magician, a pickpocket, a hypnotist, a con artist, a sleight of hand artist, a mentalist. You're all of these things rolled into one. So for me, Professional Opportunist just seemed like a great choice.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great name, and I don't look at it as a negative, because opportunities are positive. And if you have an opportunity, you should take advantage of it. It doesn't mean you're taking advantage of anything negative. It's, hey, that's an opportunity. I'm going to do it. So I love the name. Well, as you said, I totally agree with that question that was on the web, on the forum earlier today. That's what I was thinking. I consider myself a magician, but I love to dabble in all different kinds. So I kind of agree with you there. So I'll tell you what, I kind of went out and I was looking at some of your stuff, like the TED Med thing you did and all that, and that was a fascinating video. So I'm going to start with the hypnosis part first, and why don't you come in, and because you had some really good views about hypnosis and what it is and what it isn't, and doing that, and I thought it was fascinating. If you don't mind talking about that a little bit.
No, not at all. I So the background to this is that I used to be I started out working in psychiatry as a nurse, as an auxiliary nurse, working in a psychiatric hospital. Not sometime after I left school, I became fascinated with the workings of the mind, but then, interestingly, my fascination changed from the illnesses of the mind to much more sort of common everyday occurrences. And the reason for this is that I was working in a very tense environment, and I became fascinated with the conversations and the communication and the miscommunication between the staff and patients and so on. And I think what really fascinated me right from the beginning was how easily misled people were, and how their presuppositions coming into any kind of conversation would almost certainly lead to the outcome of the conversation. It's a bit like if you've ever watched a couple argue, as a bystander, as an impartial observer, it's quite often easy to realize that they are both in total agreement with each other, but neither can see it. They're just arguing for the sake of argument. And I think all of these things sort of slowly and surely led me to an interest in hypnosis. I met a man called Adam Eason, who's a very highly respected hypnotherapist here in the UK and a very, very good friend of mine now. Adam was at the time a classical hypnotherapist. He'd gone through the classical training, sleep inductions, relaxation, that wonderful deep voice that most hypnotists use at one point or another. Smooth FM, we call it over here. It's the smooth FM voice.
Yes.
And when I was sort of looking into this and meeting other hypnotists, and I learned the craft myself, and I found it quite an easy thing to do. Not being big-headed about this. It was just, it fitted into the skill set I already had. Ultimately, that was pretty much what it came down to. But what interested me, or what happened to me, was that I started to look at hypnosis through the eyes of a magician. And what that did was very simply, it made me start to question the validity of what I saw. Not in the sense of, is this true, does it work, but more of a case of, is this real, is this theatre, what is the obfuscation here? Any magician knows that the real key to making a magic effect work is theatre. The bare bones of the secret of what you're doing is usually incredibly dull and lifeless, but when you add the theatre to it, it suddenly becomes something. So I started to question whether these things in hypnosis that the hypnotists were believing were, whether they were true or not. Did you need somebody to close their eyes? Do they need to be relaxed? Is there any benefit to certain language patterns and flourishes of the linguistics? Does the person need to be deepened? Is there even an altered state in the first place? And over a process of many years, talking to lots of other people, trial and error, a huge amount of my own trial and error, I've come to the conclusion, which is incidentally shared by a good number of other people and has an awful lot of scientific backing to help it, that the simple answer is hypnosis doesn't exist, at least not in the way it's perceived. I think my simplistic view, and I love to simplify things, I'm a great believer in simplifying process. I believe that hypnosis comes down to, or what we know as hypnosis, comes down to three primary things. Belief, imagination, and suggestion. And these things are interlinked. One doesn't necessarily come before another. Sometimes belief comes first, sometimes belief is the last part of the equation. But in all hypnosis that I've ever seen, there is belief, imagination, and at some level of suggestion, whether that be a verbal suggestion or simply, because suggestion, obviously, like any communication tool, doesn't have to be limited to the verbal. It can be a facial expression. It can be the surroundings might suggest something. But what I have experienced, or what I have found out, is that there is no direct necessity for the induction process. I mean, the word induction, means just to introduce somebody, to bring somebody in to demonstrate something. You get induction days in a new job to show you what the new job is about. There's nothing hypnotic about that. It's just a process. The problem I have, though, is that there is no necessity to necessity to go through the process of speaking in a silly voice, putting somebody to sleep, making them close their eyes. I mean, they're not asleep, let's be honest with ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves into thinking that there's anything going on with this. There's no necessity to deepen the state, because there's no state to deepen. And when you start to sort of break it down, you suddenly realize that this is just about manipulating somebody's beliefs. The simple way to explain it would be this. If I were to entirely 100% pretend to stick my hand to my head, yeah, as if, say, I was an actor and you're my audience and I've got to convince you that my hand is stuck, yeah? So I'm totally involved in this pretense. It would look something like this. Yeah, there would be this battle going on, and there would be this look in my face of, I can't move my hand, I can't do it, I can't do it. If I was hypnotized into believing that my hand was stuck to my head, physiologically, exactly the same thing would be happening. There would be no distinction between the two at all. The only difference that I can put my finger on is that my perception alters. In both occasions, I am doing it, but in the hypnotized sense, I perceive that it is happening to me. Now, very brief overview, very broadly said, but I think that if you strip all these layers back, hypnosis becomes a much easier thing to understand. It becomes something that is accessible to everybody, and you realize that hypnosis is, in many respects, just a normal everyday occurrence. And we are, from the day we were born, we have responded to the suggestions around us. Anybody watching this, in fact, I would arguably say that most of the people watching this who have a phobia were given that phobia by somebody else. It was suggested to them. Most of the people that I meet who have, say, a spider phobia have that phobia because at some point in their adolescence, or even later on in life, somebody told them to be afraid of a spider. Maybe it was their mum. Maybe the first time they experienced a spider was the moment where their mum saw a spider when they were a little child, jumped on the sofa and screamed. And their little brain went, oh, all right, this is how I deal with this. And then a pattern is formed and built over many years. And what's interesting is that the human brain rationalizes behavior. And then you get people saying things like, oh, when I was a child, this giant spider crawled over my face when I was in the cot. And you're going, no, it didn't. That's absolute nonsense. Never happened.
Right, exactly.
But it's a lot easier to justify our behavior in that kind of light than it is to accept the stark reality, which is we accepted a suggestion and it became part of our lives. And in my experience, when I do hypnosis shows, distinct to your average hypnotist, oh, by the way, before I go any further, I've also got nothing against putting somebody to sleep, doing an induction, deepening it, giving suggestion, and doing a whole wake-up, as long as the practitioner understands that that's theatre. It's not why it works. It's not even how it works. It is arguably just another suggestion. Yeah, I mean, if somebody were to suggest to me to sleep, then of course, if I pretended to be asleep now, my body would relax. I'd flop down. My breathing would become slower or more shallow or deeper but longer. I would become very relaxed. My jaw would flop down. Everything would become floppy. And if I maintained that position for any length of time, it would make me feel, a bit lethargic, like you would if you were asleep. However, if you don't use the word sleep in hypnosis, or the word relax for that matter, then the hypnotized subject doesn't behave like they've been asleep or they've relaxed. In fact, just by cutting the concept of sleep stroke relaxation out of the hypnotic process, you no longer have the negative effects of hypnosis. You know, since I've been doing it this way, which has been a good few years now, I've never had somebody complain after the session that they feel really tired or lethargic or they've got hot flushes or anything else. It's a totally different experience for them entirely. I am going to do a plug, and my business partner Daniele will probably be watching this as well, and he's almost certainly going to send me some kind of disapproving message. But just to give you the heads up, we are currently working on a product for performers, which is specifically about demystifying hypnosis and bringing it into the realm of something that can be used by everybody. You know, I'm quite passionate that I think that hypnosis has an incredibly powerful place within the magic world, whether you be a sleight of hand card magician all the way up to a stage illusionist. Hypnosis is really, really useful. The problem it has is it's still wrapped up in this idea of a line of chairs and 20 people being made to look stupid. And the simple fact is that isn't hypnosis at all. That's theatre. And theatre can be presented in a lot of different ways.
Well, I really loved what you said in the talk where you said, don't be afraid of this stuff, because I'll tell you, I've been one that when I go to a hypnosis show, I'm one of those like, no, I don't want to be on stage. I don't want someone messing with my mind and everything. And the way you explained it, you know, about it just being a suggestion, and on that, for the people I hadn't seen the video, you had them hold their fingers together and pretend they were glued together, and they did. And the ones who didn't, you said, well, there again, you made the suggestion it wasn't going to work, so it didn't work for you. And there again, that's absolutely 100% true. It was the suggestions and doing that. And
out of interest, Paul, have you personally ever had ever been? Do you know what? I don't even like the word hypnosis because it has too many negative connotations. But have you experienced that for yourself? Have you ever been to a hypnotherapist or participated in a hypnosis show in any way?
Never in a show. One time at a health fair, they tried to do some hypnosis thing. I don't even remember what it was for because I don't smoke or anything, but it was just one of these, maybe it was just general relaxing, and it didn't take, and I think it's because I was too stubborn to let it take. I was one of those people you were talking about. So, yeah. You know, I did that. Okay, we actually have some great questions coming in here. Let me get to a couple of these. What Laura asked, she says, who inspired you the most to do magic in general?
That's a good question, Laura. It's better than the usual. How did you start magic? So thanks for wording it in a slightly more interesting way for me. The answer is actually slightly sad in some respects. I had no interest in magic at all as a kid. I didn't have the magic set. I didn't belong to the magic societies. It wasn't until, and I'd have to actually Google this to find out the precise time when it aired in the UK. But the very, very first time that I had any interest in magic at all, aside from in the UK, we had Paul Daniels' magic shows, and there was usually they were Christmas specials quite often. I think, you know, when I would have seen them as a kid, because we didn't have, you know, TVs weren't as popular back in the day. So, you know, at Christmas we probably had a TV magic show on, and I think I would have sat down and watched it as you did in those days with the family. And I wasn't really interested, with the exception of there was usually 5 or 10 minutes within the hour's show where the camera would pan to a card table in the corner, and some guest magician would come in and do some sleight of hand with playing cards. And that bit used to kind of intrigue me. I found that interesting, but that was it. It was very passing. And it was around about university time when David Blaine's first TV special aired in the UK on Channel 4. And as a total layperson, I was blown away by it. Absolutely, I thought it was phenomenal. What was interesting, though, was I had a good grasp, because obviously by this time I'd worked as a nurse for a number of years, and I was already interested in psychology and hypnosis, psychiatry, and related things. I had a good understanding of why it worked, not how it worked, but I understood why it worked, and I could see the performance that was going on in all of this. I had no knowledge at all that there was a magic circle or magic societies. I didn't know that there were books and VHS videos at the time. I bought a pack of cards, and there was a magic trick on that series that he performed on that, which most people will know as two-card Monty, but I learned many years later is in fact called Be Honest, What Is It by Eddie Fector. And I bought a pack of cards the next day, having watched it on TV. We didn't have a VHS recorder, so it was simply the memory of that one effect, and I'd watched it for just once as it had been broadcast, and I think he might have performed it twice on the show. I remember. No, you know what? I can't even remember what the situation was, but I bought a pack of cards the following day, and I sat on a train journey from London Waterloo back to where I lived at the time in Bournemouth, about a two and a half hour journey, and I sat with a cup of coffee on the table in front of me, and I had a pack of cards, and I took the 4 cards out, and I just went through every permutation possible until I worked out how to do it. I got it slightly wrong. I worked out a double lift. I didn't realize a triple lift, and I ended up having to do a top change from the bottom of the deck. But what's interesting about this is that in that one moment I taught to myself multiple card turnovers and top changing. And those were that was the first sleight that I worked out was a top change essentially. I then went. I think it took me a couple of weeks, but I found somebody who had a copy of the video. They'd taped it off the TV, and I got a copy of the video, and then I just watched the thing over and over and over again, and I just worked out everything that was non-gimmicked. Because obviously there were a number of things in there that, you know, unless you know about the gimmicked items, there's just no way on earth you're ever going to suss it. So that was it. I caught the bug. I was still working at the hospital at the time. I remember getting my dad to drive me around all the public libraries in a sort of 25-mile radius of where we lived, and I got every single book I could find from the library on magic, and they were all kids' magic books, but they gave me a start. And it was 8 weeks later, when I was working at the hospital, one of the patients that came into the hospital happened to be a magician from the local magic club, and we got chatting. He showed me some stuff. Obviously, I was, blown away by everything that the guy did as a layman. But he was equally as astonished as to how much I'd learned from nothing, from nowhere. And I kind of, I think he showed me a couple of moves, a couple of card sleights, and I went on. I'm going to cut a big chunk of this story out because it will take too long. My life history isn't that exciting. But coming back to Laura's original question as to who influenced me, the first person is David Blaine, just because he was the person who originally got me interested. The next person that had the most profound effect on me was Doc Eason. So a name from the magic community itself. Doc Eason was the next person, and it was probably 2 years later. About 2 years later, I went to Blackpool Magic Convention, for the first time, and Doc was there. And it was mid-afternoon. I wasn't staying at the famous Ruskin Hotel. For those who've been to the Blackpool Convention, you'll know all about the antics of the Ruskin. And I think this was possibly even the Thursday before the convention had properly kicked off. And I'd gone in there, and there was nobody in there except for this old bearded guy. Obviously, I had no idea who the man was, and I went in there, a pack of cards in hand, like every good magician should do. It's like wearing a badge, isn't it? Carrying around a pack of cards. It is. And he invited me over, and he chatted to me for a few moments, and I said, do you do magic? I'm asking Doc Easton if he does magic.
That's hilarious.
And he said, yeah. And I said, oh, could you, I said, I've not been doing it for long at all. Could you show me something? And I handed him my pack of cards, and 20 seconds later, my chosen card is sat underneath my drink in front of me, and my world fell apart. And he proceeded to do it again and again, and it was just a private audience. And I'm very, very blessed to say that in more recent years, I've become a good friend with Doc and his son Ryan, and we've shared a lot of sort of conversations about what I consider to be the important side of magic, the performance, the psychology of it. But that experience taught me one thing, and it turned my magic from being something that I did down here to something that happened up here. And he taught me probably the most vital piece of information that I could have learnt at any stage in my career, and that was to be bold, to understand that misdirection is king above everything else. And there's a lot of arguments in the magic community about, what sleights better than what, and, how good is this move and how good is that move. And all of those things become utterly irrelevant without misdirection. Let me just give this quick story, which happened a number of years, well, quite a few years later at Blackpool. And I've told this many times, so I apologise for those watching who've heard it before. But I was at Blackpool. The quick story is I was at Blackpool. There was a couple of lads showing each other their pass, and sort of, remarking how good, look at my pass. It's, look, there's almost nothing. It's almost invisible. There's hardly any sound. And I don't think I meant to sound patronising, but I think I might have inadvertently sounded a little bit patronising when they asked me what I thought. And one of the kids, slightly indignant, handed his pack of cards over to me, and he went, "Oh, if you're so good, let me see your pass." And I took his cards off him, and I looked him in the eye and went, "What, now in front of all of you?" And he went, "Yeah." I went, "I've done it," and handed the pack back, to which he replied, "Ah, that wasn't fair. I wasn't watching."
Oh, well. That's great.
Here endeth the lesson.
That's fantastic. Okay, I do want to talk a little bit more about your thoughts on misdirection, but let's take another question here, because I got quite a few piling up. This one's from Steve. Yes. Steve says, do you think / find people respond more effectively to the suggestions of some of the traditional theatrics of hypnosis? In other words, is there a benefit to using them for some people to make them think, oh, this is hypnosis?
Yeah, simple answer to that is yes. I think that my belief is that you cater to your audience, period. That's it. You're a good performer will, from a close-up point of view, when you're talking about interacting with people, a good performer will pace his audience. You'll look at her audience, you'll look at the audience, and you'll determine what you're going to do depending on them. I think there is a time for everything. There are times to this day where I will decide, because of the environment that I'm in or the expectations that are before me, to demonstrate a much more classical approach to hypnosis where I'll go through, I'll go through the motions. It's not my preferred modus operandi, but it's also, the truth is there is little more theatrically valid within the world of hypnosis than that moment that you have somebody next to you and you go, "You're not hypnotized, are you?" And they go, "No." And you say, "And you couldn't be hypnotized in front of these people, could you?" And they go, "No." And then you go, "Sleep." And they go, "Well." And the audience goes mental. It's not a necessity to put somebody to sleep or even to have them close their eyes. There are benefits to it occasionally. It's an added dimension. It has its theatrical values. So, ultimately, I mean, this goes back to the whole idea of being a professional opportunist. I will use whatever is available to me to get the best possible outcome. And sometimes, I mean, give an example. My father and I, for 4 years, owned a shop, a milkshake franchise of all things. Which bless him, my dad had retired, and he phoned me up one day and he went, "I'm bored. I've decided to buy a business." And I was thinking, "Oh, I wonder what you've bought. Some kind of, business, some, suited and booted. I don't know what it is you've done." And he went, "No, I bought a milkshake shop." It's bizarre. But I used to perform in it in the shop all the time. It was, the guy who owns it is a magician, pickpocket, and hypnotist. Why wouldn't I? It was a lot of fun it was had. Exactly. And I remember an occasion where a guy came in. He was on his holidays, and I'm trying to think where he was from now. Oh dear me, it was an East African country, and I can't think for the life of me which one it was. But based on what he was, the jewelry he was wearing, I realized that there was at least a potential that this man had a belief system in sort of spiritual stuff, witch doctors, etc.
Oh, okay.
Which was then confirmed via a few questions and conversation. He was very much a believer. And because he was with a small group of people, watched me do a card trick earlier, and this was invited for me to do something. They wanted me to do something for him, and I realized that his response to the magic, i.e., the sleight of hand stuff, wasn't great at all. He wasn't interested in this. This wasn't magic as far as he was concerned. He knew what real magic was, and this wasn't it. Right. So I thought, well, if I do a mind reading piece with him, it's going to potentially have more of an effect. But then I also thought, if I present it as I would present mind reading in the UK, it would still look to him like a cheap magic parlor trick. So without batting an eyelid, I took the opportunity to present it as if this was different. And the way I did that to create the requisite theatre is I took him to one side and I sort of sat him down. I said, "Look, normally I wouldn't do this in here because there's lots of children around, but the shop's quiet. So if you'd like, we'll do something a little bit more serious." And that was it. He was hooked. He was in there because I was now dressing it and presenting it in a different way. So the reality is, I think you use whatever is available to you. If the classical approach works best for the audience at hand or the person at hand, use it. If I was to hypnotize a young female who seemed to maybe be a little bit anxious, my presentation of hypnosis would be very soft and maternal, and the way that I would speak would be really gentle and relaxing, and it would all be very good. If, on the other hand, I was hypnotizing a 6-foot bodybuilder, I would probably opt for a slightly more aggressive, authoritarian approach because, you have to pace the people you're performing for.
Okay, great. You mentioned a little bit ago with David Blaine and Doc Eason. So we have another good question on here. And it was, if you could choose anyone, living or dead, to work with only once, who would it be and why?
Slidini, straight off the top of my head. There's no question about this at all. I do have a number of people that I would love to have been around to have met. Yeah, I think the top of my list is it's a toss-up, I think, between Slidini and Tommy Wonder as the two people that I just seemed to have a knowledge that kind of almost went beyond any of their peers. You know, there's lots of incredibly talented people in bygone eras. In fact, in some respects, you know, there's a lot of argument to say that all the greats are gone, and it's a sad thing that you know, I can't really put my finger on. There's lots of incredibly talented people alive today, and I'm not taking away from that at all, but there doesn't seem to be many alive now who epitomise magic in the way that some of these people did. Your Fred Capps, Tommy Wonder, Slidini. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Charlie Miller. These people were phenomenal. They were in a different era, and they were certainly in a different league. But I almost believe that I've watched Slidini's Paper Balls Over the Head clip from the Archives of Magic more than any other human being alive. I watched it again only like a couple of days ago. I mean, I could probably do it verbatim, as in, you know, say, so, you know, his lines verbatim. I just think it is an absolute masterclass. That 6 minutes is a masterclass in audience management and misdirection, and there's nothing else that comes close to it, in my opinion. So yeah, Slidini, definitely him.
Okay. Well, that's a very good choice. So that would be a good one, of course. Okay, a little bit ago you touched on misdirection. I'm very fascinated by your opinion of misdirection and how you say that's not the right wording for it. It should be called something different. Can you take off with that and kind of give your opinion on misdirection?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I'm not really saying anything that hasn't been said by many, many other far better people than me. I mean, misdirection is ironically misdirection in itself as a word. The concept of misdirection is the idea of making somebody look somewhere else, which presumes or presupposes in a lot of people's minds this idea of you need to be looking over here whilst I'm doing something over here. But actually, when you are misdirected like that, you are entirely aware that is what is happening. I've had great arguments with very good friends in the comedy magic world who always say comedy is the best misdirection. And I say, no, I don't think it is. I think comedy can sometimes be good misdirection, but it can often be terrible misdirection. Because if the comedian or the magician in this case says something that is incredibly funny, and you go, ha, 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 and then you look back and something's changed, you know when it happened, because you are totally aware of the moment that you looked away. Now, let me be clear about this. There are certain effects which work very powerfully on the idea of allowing your audience to know that they weren't looking at the right time. Card under the glass, perfect example of that. After the first load of the card under the glass, from here on in, it is all about, I'm going to make you look away. Yeah, you know, you rivet your attention on this glass, because in a minute it's going to be back under there, and lo and behold, 30 seconds later it's back under the glass, and the audience goes, oh no, I missed it again. And that's part of the joy in the theatre of doing it. But that's not what misdirection is about, or certainly not what attention management is about, focus of attention. The real key to me is that your audience must at all times believe that they are always looking in the place that they are meant to be looking, not necessarily the place that you want them to look at either. They always must believe that the place that they are looking is where they choose to look, and at that stage, you have this wonderful concept at the end of a routine, and it's I think it's a glorious thing to hear, almost a better noise than the applause noise, when you hear somebody say, "I never looked away. I never took my eyes off him." You know, and I think that's a wonderful thing to hear as a magician, especially when you know that's exactly what they did. There's a British magician, Dan Alexander, who I had the privilege of working with a good few months ago, and he has just this ridiculously lovely routine where he has stolen somebody's watch and he's now wearing it on his wrist, and he borrows their finger ring and he places it on the back of his hand, not 2 inches away from their watch, and he says, "Have a look in there, what can you see?" And they look inside the ring and they go, "Nothing," because it's just his hand. And then he moves it an inch closer to the watch. He says, "What can you see now?" And they're looking, going, "Nothing." And then he moves it the other side of their watch, and he asks them the same question. And then he finally puts it on top of their watch. And every single time I've seen him perform this, every time the answer is the same: nothing. They are looking through their own ring at their own watch, yet still can't see their watch on his wrist. And that is absolutely what misdirection is about. It's about the focus of the human mind. And if you can learn how to truly focus the mind of your audience, whether that be one person or an audience full of people, this is, in my opinion, this is where the real magic occurs, because the human brain is designed in such a way that we fill in the gaps all the time. We are constantly narrating our own existence, and we are constantly filling in the gaps that are missing from our experience based on our presuppositions. And it's in that area that the really strong magic takes place, where you leave room for the audience to fill the gaps and to bring themselves to the magic. And I think there is something really powerful in that way of viewing magic, that this shouldn't be about you doing something to the audience. My grandma, bless her cotton socks, she died at the age of 96, and she was an incredibly profound woman. Knew nothing about magic, you understand, but I would visit her in the hospital because she spent the last 15 years of her life in hospital, very, very ill, and she just kept going. Somehow she refused to pass on, bless her. And I just remember this one thing that she said, and it's absolutely stuck with me. We were having this conversation about magic, and I was explaining what I did, and etc. And she sat there in silence, sort of just nodding occasionally. And then just out of nowhere, just one of those little pearls of wisdom came out. And she said, "So is it like this? The job of a magician isn't to fool people, but to give them the ingredients to fool themselves." Oh.
Wise lady.
And I just thought, you know what? That is perfect. And ever since that moment, which is 10 years ago now, I have endeavored as often as I can, when I'm thinking about routines, or I'm just within the routines I already do and the way I perform, I do my best, and sometimes you've got to be more explicit than others, but I do my best to always do it in such a way that I'm giving the audience everything that they need to know to create the magic in their own minds, rather than having everything happen like bam, 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 right in front of their eyes, which I realize an awful lot of the stuff I've released is very kind of blatant, in your face magic. But even within that structure of hit after hit, there's a lot of moments which are specifically designed to allow that person to create the moment of magic for themselves, or at least to heighten the moment of magic for themselves.
Right. Well, speaking of that, this kind of ties in a little bit with that. You have some opinions on the decline of magic with YouTube and some of the other internet type things that way. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. I don't currently belong to, well, I was about to say I don't currently belong to any magic society. That's not strictly true. I am a member of something called the Sark Magic Society, but that's something I can't talk about.
Okay.
As a general rule, I think that magic societies are partly to blame for this decline, which will upset a lot of people, but I think it's important I explain why. For magic to exist, you have to have an end user that goes, wow. There has to be, I think if you put it into a simple equation, it would be trick plus wow equals magic. In other words, there has to be an audience, a spectator of magic, and that person has to be lay in some respect, and it has to be performed to them. And here's the real key. It has to be performed. The problem we have at the moment is that partly because of the magic societies, I would say that the vast majority of magicians out there don't perform, not in the real sense of structuring and thinking about being a performer. They are entirely focused on the trick. And the only people that get to see these tricks are other magicians. They devise their magic specifically to fool other magicians, and there is little to no performance at any stage of this little game. That doesn't mean to say that the magic that is created is bad, because a lot of it is great. There's some amazing stuff that people come up with, and there's some incredible skill that is demonstrated. Skills which I simply don't have, and don't particularly feel the necessity for. The downside of all this is that we've lost our way, and we've lost sight of the simplicity of magic. And you get magicians who release this amazing new way to get a card from the middle of the pack to the top, as if we didn't already have enough ways of doing that, which really do work incredibly well. Why do we need a way of doing it with one hand behind our back kind of mentality? And we forget how the simple effects work. I went and did a gig, one of these gigs where you have like 7 magicians working a massive room at a corporate event, and to my own shame, certainly for the first half of the evening, I fell into this category with everybody else. 6 of us were, this is going back a couple of years, which makes this even more logical. 6 of us were young, cool, hip and trendy magicians, doing our Sybil cuts and all of our fancy card sleights and loaded to the nuts with gimmicks and all sorts of other weird things. The 7th guy was a guy who was probably in his late 50s, who had come along with, the same 6 effects that he'd done for the last 40 years kind of thing. And they were really simple things. He did a sponge ball routine, which again wasn't overly complicated or clever. It didn't have more than about 3 phases to it, and it just classic normal stuff. He did a straightforward sort of chop cup routine with a coffee cup off the table, and not a chop cup, just a cup and ball routine. And he did a basic ambitious card and something else, a card to wallet or something. And we were all sort of sniggering at him, going, "Oh, look at this old guy, with his simple magic. He brought the house down." The audiences loved it because they could understand what he was doing. He was polished as an entertainer, and he put us all to shame. Without any doubt, he put all of us to shame, because we were all competing against each other. We were all interested in who's got the latest thing, who's got the fanciest little technique. And nowadays, you've got YouTube, and every magician and his wife wants to sell their products, and come on, let's be honest, I've put products out there, so I'm not saying that I haven't done these things myself, but I think we've just lost sight of what magic is really about. And it's if magic I think the easiest way to put it is this: magicians are now obsessed with the effect and not the affect. Yeah, it's all about the magic effects. It's no longer about the effect that it has on the audience, and I think that's a real shame. And I would love to see magic clubs. And again, I'm only speaking from the UK, so that America may well be way ahead of us on this one. But I think that
not really. It's about the same.
Yeah, I think that magic clubs should be preparing the next generation performers. First and foremost, that should be their job, is to create good magicians. Not good magic. We've already got lots of good magic. We've got so much good magic. And the irony is, you look around on the magic dealers at the moment, and half of the blooming stuff that they're selling as new, exciting stuff is actually from books decades old. Not new at all.
Yes.
I mean, I remember,
yes,
no offense to Oz Perlman, but I remember a long time ago, he put out an effect called Clutch, which was a card out of a deck from somebody's top pocket. And I remember when it came out as this kind of amazing new trick. Number one, I remember seeing it written up in the Magic Menu, Jim Sisty's Magic Menu, which is a fantastic volume of books. And if you can get hold of them, there's absolute gold in there. There really is. And number two, I remember one of the old guys at the Magic Club that I first joined when I, after being starting Magic about a year into it, I joined the Magic Club locally to me. And I remember one of the old timers showing me that trick. And looking back now, I realized that you go back 15 years, maybe 20 years at the most, but possibly not even that. You go back a decade, and magicians just shared ideas. You didn't look at every single thing that you came up with as being something that was my precious, and I'll only let you have it if you buy it off me. You just, if you had a collection of routines, you might put a DVD out of your routines or some lecture notes, but you didn't look at it as being more important than it really was. And I think there is a real sense where magicians need to wake up and go, look, we're not curing cancer here. We're not really doing anything that is that important in life. It might be artistic, but it's not art. Yeah, there is a difference. It's artistic, but it's not necessarily art. And I think that we need to be a bit more honest with ourselves. Now, I'm all for the DVDs that I've put out, with the exception of the hide and seek thing, which was a method that I'd worked on. It was a Pat Page idea. Pat and I had come up with it ages and ages ago, and it sat in a notebook of mine until I finally released it with the permission of his family after he passed away. But all the other stuff I put out was all about performance. The tricks were because the magic producer, the first one was Peter Nardi, and then it was Russ Stevens from RSVP. So you have to actually have a number of tricks for the DVD. But for me, it was always about performance. It wasn't really about the actual effect or the method or whatever. This was me saying, this is how I perform. And enough magicians have said to me, we like the way you perform and we'd like to learn from you. And this seemed like a good opportunity to put it out. But I used to get, in fact, I still do occasionally, I get emails from people going, have you seen so-and-so's DVD? He's taken your effect. Who cares? I mean, really, who cares? Get a grip, It was an ambitious card routine, or it was a variations of a Hofzinser's Aces effect. I haven't invented anything. I've redressed something. I've reworked something. There was a big deal a while back about who was it? Oh, Shin Lim put out an iPhone, an Omni iPhone. That was it. It was the Omni iPhone. And there was a big furore about whether he'd stolen the idea off somebody else, and etc. And I remember at the time thinking, the only person who can claim any originality is the person who came up with the Omni deck. Because after that, anybody else who turns something into plastic
That makes sense.
It's just a different shape, you know. Let's not lose ourselves in what we do. You know, be precious and proud about how hard you work as a performer. Be precious and proud about the smiles that you put on people's faces. But above and beyond that, let's remember the old saying, magicians guard an empty safe. And I think that might be why magicians get so up in arms about, oh, that's my idea and you've stolen my idea or whatever. Because actually, when you really boil it down, your idea is not worth much, is it? Because it's just and I know, by the way, I know that I'm going to get into an awful lot of trouble for saying that, because I know how precious people are.
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinions on stuff. So,
yes. And let me just reiterate, as I said earlier, everything I'm saying is just my opinion, and that's it. It's not that important. Even in and of itself, even my opinion isn't that important. So don't lose sleep if you disagree with what I've said.
There you go. Now, earlier you mentioned about people doing their stuff and that it was kind of over, way over yourself. But the Magic Circle voted you the best close-up magician in the UK. So you have to have something going for you. And I know you're modest, you weren't going to bring that up, but that's quite an accomplishment.
The Magic Circle voted in 2006 that I was in fact the best close-up magician in the room that evening. It was do you know what? It was fun. I'd been working as a pro for a good few years by then, and I'd been working in restaurants, getting on and doing my own thing. And it was the first, I'd entered a couple of sort of local magic competitions. The Magic Club has its annual competition, and I'd won those a few times. And somebody said to me, oh, you should enter the Magic Circle comp. And I think I'd joined the Magic Circle like a year earlier or something. And I'd only been twice because, I don't live in London. So, getting up to London on a Monday night for the club evening just was impractical. So I'd only been a few times. And somebody said, enter the competition. I thought, oh, yeah, I'll go and do it. And I remember turning up to the competition, genuinely not having an act. I had the stuff in my pockets that I had in my pockets when I went to work, when I gigged. And I gigged, at the time I had a residency, and I did sort of 3 nights a week at the residency. I worked in a popular sort of entertainments venue in one of the restaurants there, so it was a packed house all the time. And I've been there a good few years. So I just Magic Circle with the stuff in my pockets, and I had, as I do with with everything I do, I had a vague idea in my head of what I might do, but above and beyond that, there was no patter rehearsed. There was nothing. It wasn't an act. It was just me doing what I did at the gig. And I was even dressed as I would be for this restaurant gig, which was in jeans and a t-shirt, or jeans and a short sleeve shirt. And at the time, the Magic Circle had a very strict dress code, which I completely broke on that occasion. I won. I think there was a lot of people that were quite upset about me winning at the time. Some of the other acts weren't too happy either, because before, we're all waiting behind, the curtain to go on, and everybody else is there with their specially made tables and rehearsing their acts and going over their lines and checking their notes. And I was reading a novel at the time. It wasn't magic related. I was just reading a book and drinking a coffee. And people were going, so what are you going to do? And I was going, I'm not really sure yet. Yeah. I don't think they enjoyed my cavalier attitude at all. But no, for some bizarre reason, I won. And in fact, it is. It's up there on the top of my my mantelpiece, hidden away in the corner. My wife insists that that the trophy actually has pride of place in the house. Although it's not that pride of place, because I don't think it's been dusted in a long time. But it is up there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, maybe that relaxed attitude's why you did so well. Sometimes I think that can really help, being comfortable. doing a thing on when you were talking about the misdirection and actually directing a person towards thing. One of the things you mentioned there was, you know, that you vanished their phone slowly. You didn't do it quick. You didn't do anything there. You just had their attention where you needed it, and in that particular effect, and you vanished the cell phone. And you said, I didn't do it fast. I did it slowly, and you know, it was very, very well done that way. And maybe that's something we can all take from that, is to slow down a little bit, be comfortable with what we're doing, and relaxed, and that should help.
Well, you know, I said that the Magic Circle was the first competition I entered, so it was, and I came first. I think the following year I entered the Macmillan Day, the international convention, and I came second. And then the year after, or maybe even later that year, I entered the Blackpool competition and came fourth. So first, second, fourth. I've never entered a competition again.
Yeah, I'd say maybe you should stop. That's not nice. Okay. Hey, I wanted to bring up a couple of your effects that I've seen, and you know, you do have them available on your website, which now's a good time to tell what your website is. It is professional-opportunist.com. Did I get that right?
Yeah, professional opportunist with a hyphen in the middle.com.
Right.
By all means, have a look at there at the moment. The website is currently being redone, and that will launch. The new website will, it's same URL, but the new website will launch later this year, sort of early December. I'm hoping it will be ready by. It's just a tweak, essentially. This also, if you don't mind, this also is another a good time. Before we did the webinar, I was asked if I had any sort of special offers and bits and pieces for the viewers. Excuse me. So I don't have like a big back catalogue of products, and weirdly, I don't even have the DVDs that I've done. I've done Still Fancy a Pot of Jam, the Professional Opportunist ones, Hide and Seek. There might even be another one slid in there somewhere, but I don't actually have copies of any of those. They're just available through magic dealers. I've got a couple of downloads on my own website. Available. Cerebral Steel and Card in the Box is there. However, we do have an offer, and that is if you go. So I'm in business with my friend Daniele. We've got a company called Power Academy Limited, POWA, and the website is www.powa.academy. It's just that, power.academy. www.power.academy. If you go there, and we are offering two free videos, two free training videos, which are essentially about confidence. It's about the two aspects of confidence. The videos are specifically to do with pickpocketing, because we also have a training course available on pickpocketing. But if you are interested, if you're interested in these two free videos, go there, sign up, and we'll get those sent to you. But even if you're not interested directly in those two videos, which you might as well be because they're free, go and sign up anyway, because we are producing or making this training academy, the Professional Opportunist Wrongless Approach, which is my branding, the Power brand. We're doing a training academy. At the moment, we've got a full course on pickpocketing available, which is very, very extensive, and it covers not just the technical side of the art, which all the other things do as well, but more importantly, it covers the other side, all the soft skills. Plus, it's a great thing. At the moment, there's over 4.5 hours of content on the subject of pickpocketing. But we're not going to stop there. In the new year, Danny and I are getting back together again, once we've done the whole family Christmassy stuff, and we're going to film some more content to add in. So anybody who's already bought the course will get the extra stuff for free, as in addition, that we won't charge you more for the extra stuff. And, you know, hopefully over the time, we're going to just, you know, every time I come up with something else or we film something else, we'll just add it in, and you'll get an email saying, hey, some more content, there's some more stuff. We're also going to do some stuff on hypnosis, and we'll be doing some magic stuff as well, and revisiting some old favorites. So it's really worth getting over there, signing up to find out more about Power Academy. But yeah, if you go to my website, there's also a couple of things in there that might be of interest, but I'd prefer to push people towards power.academy at this time, because that's going to become, in 2016, that will be the hub of the trade side of my business, and the professional opportunist website will be just about you know, hiring me for a gig.
Okay, I noticed with that you also released a book that, you know, professional opportunist, wrongless approach. That's that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so so the Power Book. The Power Book is essentially everything in my head. So it's not a book about magic. It's not. There are no tricks contained within. You're not going to learn another double lift or another ambitious card or anything of that nature. It is a book about the psychology of performance, but it's not specifically related to magic. It's everything I've learned from my life to date, being a performer, but also the stuff I learned prior to that as a nurse, working in psychiatry, and even prior to that, I was brought up on a holiday park, an entertainment holiday park. So everything I've learned about life is in this book. I shy away from calling it a self-help book, because I really don't like the self-help genre at all. It is the antidote to self-help in many respects. It's very plain and simple. You know, it cuts to the chase. It says things how it is. It's very English in the way that it's written. There's no sort of, you know, glam and razzmatazz. But there's also absolutely no marketing strategy behind that book at all. It's something I wrote a good few years ago, and I only sold it through my website, and I've sold, I don't know, 500, 600 copies maybe. But I've had a lot of really good response to the book. I mean, phenomenal response to the book, actually. And if anybody watching this has bought it, you know, say something nice on the forum so other people know.
Actually, they just popped up. Steve Griffin said the book's great, highly recommended.
Oh, so, thanks, Steve. Thank you very much. I'll send you that $5.
Before we get into the pickpocketing, Myron asked a nice question here. It says, if you were forced to pick one sleight, which one would you choose?
Do you know what? I could tell you that instantly. The top change.
Okay.
Without any shadow of a doubt.
We were talking about that earlier before the thing you were mentioning that about the top change, so that doesn't surprise me.
First sleight I ever learnt, and it's a toss-up. I mean, I think it is the top change. Coming a close second would be a side steal. I love the side steal. I think it's a phenomenal a utility move. But no, the top change, you can't beat it. It's the magician's secret weapon. Whenever anything goes wrong, the top change solves the problem. It is beautiful on its own, and if executed correctly, which is not about technique, it's about attention management and misdirection and all the other bits and pieces. But you've got the top change in your arsenal, you will be performing miracles. There's just no two ways about it. It allows you to do the most astonishing feats. Magic doesn't get better than the top change. It's like if you can remember the very first time somebody did a double lift to you before you knew about magic, That moment where somebody showed you a card, handed it to you, and it was now another card. The top change allows you to do that without the move, because there is no move in a top change as far as the audience is concerned. You know, just one single card can change over and over again, and it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, it is very neat thing to see. Thinking of neat things to see, you kind of mentioned them a little bit, but you went over them kind of quickly. But you have two things out there that I really loved, was Box Clever and Cerebral Still. Both of those I really enjoyed watching the videos and on your page and doing that. I would tell anybody that's interested in something that, you know, might be, I don't know, different or not, but I mean, it was very entertaining and the way you do it. And I love how you keep everybody involved when you're doing that. When you're setting out a table or doing something, it's not just this person. You bring everybody in, and that in itself is an art, I think.
So Box Clever came as a result of my, quite frankly, my obsession with Card Under Glass, which is entirely Doc Eason's fault. Thanks, Doc. Box Clever came about because it's more practical to load the card under the box than it is a glass. Period. I mean, the cards are in a box. Why not make use of it? The build up in in Box Clever, was they're all standard moves in the sense of the card appearing under the box. I've got a lot of work on it that isn't on that presentation, and it's one of the things that's on the list for next year, maybe to put together something for Power Academy, a sort of a treatise of card under box. So I've got lots of moves and ideas for it. Excuse me. The main reason for the routine was the ending, oddly enough, and it was the one element of the routine that I heard quite a few people going, "Oh, I didn't do that bit," and I'm thinking, why? That was the whole point of it. Was the climax of the routine where the entire pack appears back inside the box. And it was interesting because I'd been doing it for, I don't know, 18 months to 2 years, maybe. It was something that I played around with for a long time. And it wasn't that I was keeping it a secret. It wasn't like a precious thing that I was hiding from other magicians. It was just one of those things that I was doing, and it never dawned on me that nobody else was doing it. And a friend of mine, Gary Jones, saw me perform it, and he said, "That is phenomenal. You need to get that out." And it's like, "What, really? Surely other people have done this before." And I did some research, and at the time, I couldn't find anybody else that had done the full deck back into the box. I mean, there might have been somebody, but the research that I did and all the people that I spoke to, nobody'd come across anybody. But I love it. I still do it to this day, and it's an incredibly versatile routine. As I said, I've got new work on it now. Do you know what? Actually, I think I will. At the end of this, I'll put a link up. It's a YouTube video. It's a private video that I've got on my YouTube page, and I'll stick the link up at the bottom of the questions on the forum. I'll have to load back into it and do that. So I'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Which is me sat here in my front room doing it for. There's a magic forum called Magic Clips. Which was started by a friend of mine here in the UK. And it's a great forum. It's a closed group, unfortunately, so I can't give anybody access to it. But I made a video for that group a year or so ago. And it's the idea of card under box, all performed on the top of a glass that somebody's holding in a cocktail environment. And it's something I've been doing for a long time. So it gives you the ability to do all the card under box loveliness, but framing the whole thing on top of somebody's drink while they're stood up in a cocktail environment. You'll have to have balls of steel to do it. I know you'll think you have to have balls of steel to do it, but actually you don't. It's the misdirection is pretty much built in for you. But I'll stick the link up, and people can have a little look at that. I will ask as a courtesy that the link stays within this forum, because it is something that I will probably package together professionally, with some live footage at some point next year. So consider this to be a gratuity, but please don't take advantage of it. By all means, do it, play with it. And if you come up with something that you'd like to share with me, I would love to hear input.
That's a good idea.
To me, magic is all about development. One of the beautiful things about our community, there's a lot of crap in our community. One of the beautiful things in our community is the idea that one magician come up with an idea, share it with another magician, and 6 weeks later, that magician will come back with an improvement, with something that you could never have dreamt of in a million years. And it takes it to the next level. And I think that's what this community should be about. We should be helping each other to become better, to do the one job that we all have in common, and that is bringing delight to other people. The money is
totally agree with that. Yes.
So yeah, I'll post that link up afterwards.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Now, since we advertised this talk as this Q&A as being with you being a pickpocket, I'd like to delve into that a little bit, because of course it's you do the pickpocketing and doing this, but with no I don't know how to say it right, with no evil intentions or anything. Everybody gets everything back. It's all fun, and I think it's great, the stuff I've seen.
Yeah, pickpocketing fascinates me, and it has done for a long time. From theatrically speaking, it fascinates me because I think it is a much loved genre, but it is a little known genre as well. It's one of those things that if you meet somebody who does pickpocketing, then their audiences love what they do. There's no disputing that at all, and it's very, very rare, as in almost unheard of, where a professional pickpocket will have any trouble from the audience for doing the act. I think it's more likely to be when it's done wrong or in the wrong circumstance that problems occur. But as long as you're very clearly there to entertain, as long as you're in the guise of a performer and you're following some very basic principles about making sure that people know what you're doing, and that it clearly can't be perceived as theft, then it's great fun. And I can't say whether I like one thing more than another, because I love for magic, pickpocketing, and hypnosis is pretty much equal. The audience dictates on which one I choose to do. But there is something wonderful about pickpocketing, in the sense that you don't need anything other than you and your hands. You can utilize magic technique as a way in, but you don't need props. You don't need packs of cards or anything else to do a little pickpocketing moment. Yet that moment where you hand something back to somebody, I mean, you can see it in their eyes every single time, that absolute whoa. And depending on how you present it, people can either see it as, how did you take that off me? Because clearly you present it as a pickpocket, all the way through to it being seen as magic. One of the ideas that I've played around with for a long time is removing an object off one person, putting it in the pocket of another person. Now, a few seconds later, because obviously this is a fairly tight performance time, a few seconds later, creating the illusion that I can teleport an item from your pocket to his.
Yeah.
Now that's not viewed as pickpocketing. They don't backtrack that in their mind, or certainly not immediately as, oh, he took it off me and put it into him. They see it in the context that it's delivered, which is magic. you made something vanish from my pocket and reappear in my friend's, and that's astonishing. I think Derren Brown, in one of his books, it's either Absolute Magic or Pure Effect, I can't remember which one now, it's been years since I read either of them, talks about the idea of stealing, like I don't know if he says it's a ring or a watch or a bracelet or something, but stealing something off somebody and taking the opportunity of them misremembering whether they wore it that evening or not. Now, if you're doing a corporate event, whereas if you're a bloke wearing a watch, the chances are you wear your watch every day, and in fact an awful lot of blokes probably don't even bother taking their watches off at night, whereas women take all of their jewelry off every night. They go through their ritual and it's all removed and it's all put on back the next day, but not always the same things. They have a jewelry box with lots of items. So this woman at a fancy cocktail party or whatever, the watch or the piece of jewelry that she has on her isn't necessarily her day-to-day wear. It could be something that she just puts on because she's come out. So actually stealing that nice watch off her could potentially lead, and I'm trying to remember what the book said now, but it's something along the lines of, it's the idea of saying, I see that you're not wearing a watch. And in that moment, there's two possibilities. The possibility is that she says, oh my goodness me, somehow you stole my watch, in which case you reveal it and that's it, and everybody claps and it's done. Or she simply goes, no. Because in her mind, in that moment, she's forgotten that she put it on that evening and she still thinks it at home. So now you have the possibility of, with a bit of sleight of hand, showing your hands empty, cupping them together and getting her to imagine something from her jewelry box teleporting to my hands. And now you've got this most mind-blowing piece of magic that's just occurred. So I think it's a wonderful thing. If you're a mentalist, the ability to steal something off somebody, to lift a guy's wallet, peek some information from his wallet, and put it back, and then use it to mind read 20 minutes later. I mean, there really are a lot of options that go beyond the obvious stealing concept. But even if it's just the basic, being able to steal a tie or a watch or a wallet or a cufflink or a belt, it's an amazing skill to have, and it's a huge amount of fun to perform. It really is. I can't tell you, if you don't do it, you won't know. But it is an amazingly fun thing to do, because it feels like it's right on the very edge of what we do. It's as close as we can get to being con men. And I would hazard a guess that the vast majority of magicians out there watching this, there's at least a little bit of them that would love to be a con man, that would love to be within that genre. You couldn't help but come out of the cinema having watched Ocean's 11 wishing you were Brad Pitt for just 5 minutes in the role. Yeah, wishing that you were Danny Ocean. Yeah, or whoever played Danny Ocean in the film, George Clooney, I think. But you see the point I'm making. It's a great thing to do, and I would highly advise, strenuously suggest that you have a look into it, and get rid of some of the myths in your head as well. It's people don't see it as a bad thing. As long as you are very clearly a performer in a performance environment, and there is an invitation, if I go and do a gig, and if I walk up to the table and I introduce myself and I say, my name's James, magician, pickpocket, hypnotist, whatever else that I say, if at some point I look at you and I say, sir, would you stand up and come over here? The very act of you standing up and walking to me means that you've consented to being part of the performance. And that's all you need. From that moment on, there is no problem of allegations of this, that, and the other. As long as you, by nature, as a human being, are a good person. If you're a nice guy or girl, and you're in a performance environment, nobody's going to accuse you of anything. you know, have some common sense. Wave the object above their head when you take it. Pass it to their husband or their wife as soon as you've taken it, or whatever. And, you know, I'm not a massive fan of stock lines, but on the odd occasion that somebody has, and it's usually a joke, more often than not it's a joke, or somebody trying it on the odd occasion that somebody throws out that, you know, oh, I had 50 quid in my wallet kind of moment, you know, I had 50 bucks in my pocket. And I tend to throw back the same tongue-in-cheek comedy line, which is along the lines of, if you had 50 quid in your wallet, mate, you'd have bought a better shirt. And it gets a big laugh from the audience. And it you know, I don't think I've ever had an occasion I can recall when somebody actually accused me of theft for real. I've had a good number of occasions where people have joked, and I've had a couple of occasions where somebody's tried it on. And it's very obvious that they're trying it on. And my response is enough. You know, my very relaxed, you know, I don't be so stupid kind of mentality is enough for the person to go, all right, fair enough, you know. Yeah. But yeah, I really have a look into it. Power.academy.
Sounds interesting. It really does. I mean, I've never tried any of that, and it does sound fun.
The one thing I will say about that is prior to doing the online training course, so we could make it available to a wider audience of magicians and performers, I've spent the last 2 and a bit years doing one-day courses here in the UK, small groups of a maximum of 10 people per time. And I've lost count of how many I've done now, but I've done a lot of them. And every single time, we get to midway through the morning, and people, you can hear it in the room, and people start saying, this is really easy. This is actually, you know, I never expected, you know, I paid the money to come, and I never thought I'd be able to do it. But every single time the same comment comes back, I can do this. You know, I'm astonished. And I think, I would like to think, and I hope it's the case, that one of the reasons for that is that we give some solid theory, some practical skill set stuff at the beginning of the day, rather than just saying to somebody, you know, well, what you do is you stick your hand in the jacket, you take the wallet, and you lift it in this manner. We give the mindset. We talk about the skills that underpin the mechanics of the steel, and you realize, you know, most people by midday realize that it is 20% about the technique and 80% about the mindset. And it's the day is very much focused on giving you the technique, but really giving you the understanding of you know, how do I do this? Not from a technical point of view, but from a mental point of view. You know, who do I need to be? How do I need to act? What do I need to think to be a pickpocket? And we pride ourselves on covering that really well. And again, if anybody listening to this, somebody other than Steve, that was a really nice comment about the book, Steve, but somebody other than Steve, because it will look really odd if you do it again. If anybody else has been on the course or whatever, then, you know, please do chip in and say something. So yeah,
I'm sure they will. And if we don't necessarily get the stuff right here while we're live, I'm sure we'll get more comments and everything through the Believe in Magic place, you know, and people will discuss as they've got to see, you know, get the opportunity to see it, the video that they may not have got a chance to see it live and stuff. And because it's a very interesting topic, and I'm sure it will be discussed a lot. And that, did you have anything else that you really wanted to cover? We've kind of not too far over time, but we're low over time there. And so I didn't know if you had anything else, James, that you are dying to say.
Well, first of all, just, you know, thanks for those of you who've put up with me rabbiting on now for an hour and a half. My wife says that the one thing that I'm never short of is words. So thanks for putting up with my sort of string of consciousness, my stream of consciousness. It's been a pleasure to be here. I hope I've answered a few of the questions adequately, if not in great detail. You know, my business partner would tell me if I didn't once again give another little plug to go and visit www.power.academy, POWA.academy. Please do come along, sign up. We're going to give you some free stuff anyway, but you'll also be the first people to hear about what's coming next in the new year. And it's a different way of learning. It's not your bricks and mortar shop, and it's not your DVDs or even your downloads. It's online streaming content, which allows us to update live rather than you having to buy more stuff. Once you buy a course from us, like the pickpocketing course, then anytime we update, add to it, it's just there for you. And you can access it from your tablets, your mobile phones, your laptops, from anywhere that you have a connection to the internet, which these days is pretty much everywhere. And if anybody's worried about cost of broadband costs, etc., we've got a nice program that compresses everything down but keeps the quality high. So you're not gonna be sucking up your data usage by watching the videos. We've made sure of that as well. So yeah, the only thing I would sort of finish on, if I can, is just just a plea to everybody to say, really think about what your magic's about. Why did you become a magician? Did you become a magician because you wanted to show off to other magicians? Because if you did, there's a real question in my mind as to why. That doesn't make any sense to me. If you got into magic because at some point somebody showed you magic and you just felt amazing watch, then remember that, cherish that feeling, because that's the feeling you want to create in other people. And the way that you do that is by learning how to perform. Watch other performers, go out and perform yourself, take every opportunity to perform. If you've forgotten what it feels like to experience magic, then find a way to remind yourself. Turn off that little magic brain of yours that insists on watching a trick and going, oh, that was a double lift, or that was a this, that, and the other. And watch things fresh as often as you can. The way that I do it is simple. If any of you ever meet me at any social events, and if any of you are ever tend to come up to me and say, oh, James, and do call me James, don't call me Mr. Brown. I'm not even 40 yet, for goodness sake. I'm James. If you come up to me and you want to show me a trick, I will say to you the same thing, and that is no, don't show me a trick. Go and find somebody who's not a magician to perform to, and I will watch. Because I think that to me is the best way for me to experience magic. I need, if I watch you perform to a layperson, I'm not reaching the trick you're doing. I'm watching how they're responding to it, because that'll tell me everything I need to know about your magic. So there we go. It's about performance. It's not about the effect. It's about the affect.
Well said. Very well said. Well, I want to give a big thank you to James Brown, the professional opportunist. Don't know if I'll get a chance to talk to you, but happy holidays and everything, and tell your family the same from me, because I know you have a lovely family. I've read about them on the thing, on your webpage. And other than that, I want to say, for Believe in Magic Place Public, I'm Paul Burnham, and I want to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.